Hey, welcome back. Business 150, Introduction to Management. This is now video number 2 in our module examining and exploring the topic of teams in organizations. And you can tell from this title slide, the topic of this video is the composition of teams. How do you put teams together? And what are some of the best practices for working in building teams? So we hope that after this video, you will be able to describe the types of groups and teams that exist in organizations. And we probably should say right at the outset that while the textbook makes a bit of a fine distinction between groups and teams, I'm not really making that distinction in this module. When we talk about groups and teams, we are pretty much using those terms synonymously. And I do realize the textbook makes a distinction, but for the purposes of these micro lectures, I think the things we need to say apply to both. All right, so when we talk about teams, we realize that there's a couple different ways to think about them in organizations. You see them here on this slide. The first way is to think of, is it a formal team or is it an informal team? And you see the distinction here on the slide. Formal teams are created deliberately and explicitly by the organization, whereas informal teams arise naturally from normal social interaction and relationships that happen in between colleagues. And so while on the one hand, a formal team may be granted formal resources and responsibility by administration and management, informal teams are still incredibly important in helping things get done. And many times in contemporary organizations, a team that starts out as an informal team is then recognized by management and given the formality of actual composition and access to resources. That's one way to distinguish two different types of teams, but there's another one. You can see it there, the second large category there, talking about functional and cross-functional teams. You see the first definition, functional teams perform specific organizational functions with members from several vertical levels of the hierarchy, whereas cross-functional teams cut across the firm's hierarchy and are composed of people from sometimes vastly different functional areas and possibly even different levels within those functional areas. So you sort of get the sense, and of course more on this in the textbook as well, there's different ways that an organization, that management can choose to put together teams. And of course, a lot of it becomes a question of, are folks already cooperating, collaborating, and working together? If not, what is the purpose and the function of this particular team you're thinking of formalizing? And to what end and what purposes do you think that they'll be able to accomplish by working together? All of these are the kinds of questions you need to ask as you consider, shall we put these folks together onto a team? Now, regardless of the type or the size of the team or the group, no one is going to be successful without the right mix of skills and abilities. And obviously what we're talking about here is diverse and heterogeneous groups and teams, because if you have a whole bunch of folks who all do the same thing with the same skill set, in what way will they be able to complement each other? What we're really talking about is a group with diverse sets of perspectives and skills and abilities, and that way they can provide better and more diverse solutions to organizational problems. You see there in the third bullet point, groups with diverse membership, well, quite frankly, they'll probably take longer to become cohesive, because if you put together a bunch of people who are very different from each other, you've immediately created, well, several reasons for folks not to get along, right? But if you can get that diverse group to be cohesive, they will likely be more productive in the long run. And we've talked about that earlier in this class. This has definitely been my particular experience, especially in grad school. But diversity in and of itself does not necessarily get the best out of teams. It's when you get diverse groups to do two things. One, create a culture of open tolerance for the natural differences that diverse people will have from one another because of history, because of culture, because of background, because of education, because of experience. There will be in a group of diverse individuals a whole lot of differences. And so you have to deliberately create the culture of open discussion, open communication, and open tolerance for these differences, that it doesn't make one person better or worse because of where they went to school, where they grew up, or any of those other kinds of things, right? And the key to that, of course, is creating an environment where open communication is welcomed. It really is the key, at least in my experience, and of course in some of the academic research as well. It is the key to getting the very best and most out of groups dedicated to a diverse membership. So we hope that helps. It's a short little video, but we hope that as you think about these things and contemplate more of these topics in the text, that you can better describe the types of groups and teams that exist in contemporary organizations. Hope that's helpful, and we will see you in the next lecture.